Great. Welcome everybody to the Cascade session. Few housekeeping points to take care of first. First off, we're experimenting with lots of new equipment, have been for the last month, and so sometimes you hear me as if I'm 50 years younger, sometimes you barely hear me. So I know a bunch of different things are going on, but overall, we're excited about the direction this is going. So, if something isn't right, just write in the chat so we can take a look and see if we can rectify it. First thing. Second thing, we're starting Cascade. We're starting with Cascade, which is a set now of 3 raw blacks. Now I'm going to get everybody on the same page in this first session. Next week when we do Primordial, I'm going to talk about potential health benefits. And then at the end, Newman will cover everything that I haven't covered up to that time. So where are we? Let's start with that first today. Cascade comes from the Ilau Mountains. Let's put this in perspective. Ilau Mountains is about a 258 square mile area in Yunnan Province, and it has the largest subtropical forest of anywhere in that latitude in the world. It is an incredible place that is not fully explored. Some parts of it have been explored fairly well, but most of it has not. The range of weather there, here's what they say about this place. Every other day is a different set of weather. Every day expresses one of 4 different seasons. So the point of this place is hugely variable. And it's such a large place, you've got an incredible number of unusual animals, unusual insects. You go into these forests, they are mixed forests. In other words, you've got various varieties of trees. It's become famous because it's got all these species of tea trees. Here, obviously, in the shop, we only do the Camellia sinensis. There are other tea-producing trees, most of which none of it ever gets to market. And that's because there's so little. But in this forest, you have tea trees that go back to almost 3,000 years old. The one that we took customers to in 2019 is said by people in this area of Yunnan to be the oldest tea tree extant. Now, you go to Fengqing and they say, well, this 3,500-year-old one is the oldest one in existence. So you have a bunch of areas where they claim to have old or older. That doesn't much matter for our purposes. What really matters for our purposes is that it's tea tree forest, it's untouched by normal cultivation modalities, there's no pesticides, there are no fertilizers. This is indigenous peoples that harvest these things, and they have a long tradition of doing such. So that's kind of the background. When you think about this place, the other thing you have to note is many, many, many days are misty. And from a tea growing perspective, heavy mist, abundant water, particularly during the winter, produce outstanding end results. And this is absolutely true in the Ilau Mountains. When you think about when they harvest this, you know this is true. They harvest these years later and later. And part of the situation is that the mist and the rain, more and more. And as that happens, these tea trees take up the nutrients, talking to the other trees and plants that are around them. And they get all these interesting flavors, and they get ready later and later and later in the season. Now, are they in the summer when they should be in the spring? No, that's not what I mean. Later and later is incrementally later. So it's still in the spring that they're harvesting. But unlike other places where it's plantation and at lower elevations, where it's more year by year predictable, this is not year by year predictable. Again, you're living in this type of a forest. Well, you're not living there because it's very hard to live there. Actually, some indigenous peoples do live there, but it is very hard. Weather-wise, it's dangerous trying to get around because it's very steep and unpredictable. It is true that on the periphery of the Yunnan Mountains, they have the old Tea Horse Road. And you can actually, as a tourist, walk part of that road, but you really can't enter into these deep zones. Well, if you do it at your own risk. And it's very dangerous because it's just unpredictable what is there. And again, from an animal point of view, they have bears, they have leopards, snakes, many of them poisonous snakes. Really great conditions for producing some incredible teas. And Cascade is one of those incredible teas. When we think about raw black and fully fermented black, let's do a quick update, not update, but reminder of what these terms mean. Oh, and let's also include dark tea in that. This is my favorite term, dark tea. Hey, would you like a cup of dark tea? And most of you would be scratching your head depending on who was saying it. Now, if you know I'm saying it, then you know it's a scientific way of saying something. But if you're out there in the wider public and somebody says, would you like a cup of dark tea? I'd be very careful in how you answer that question because you might end up with coffee. What a horrible mistake. All right, so the term dark tea has arisen because this goes all the way back to the 1600s when the British and the Dutch started calling heavily oxidized teas, which China has never called anything but red tea, they started calling it black tea. And so in the West, we have all this black tea. Was it real black tea or is it fake black tea? Well, is it oxidized tea, which is really red tea, but everywhere else here called black tea? Or is it fermented tea? So I'm in the fermented section today because Yunnan Mountains, big leaf, tea trees, fermented. We have raw, and again, we have ripened or cooked. And then we have this dark. Where in the world did this term dark tea arise? Well, it arose in China because they realized probably within the last 30 years that everybody in the West was calling heavily oxidized tea, black tea, and fermented tea. Well, they were calling it a bunch of different things, including there was a school of thought out of China, hey, why don't we just separate pu'er as a separate category? Well, that's wrong because that belongs to fermented tea. You can't, well, you can do anything you want, but it doesn't make sense to separate it out as a separate category. So the Chinese, who were looking at, well, maybe we can translate this differently because it's the word hei cha. Hei literally means black. Hey, let's just call it dark, you know, black and light. And so when you hear the term dark tea, that's usually referring to some sort of fermented tea. So be aware. And again, we're in the raw black today. So what are the steps? Quickly. You pick, you wither, and you wither for a long time. Well, long relatively speaking. You wither for 12 to 48 hours, something like that. And every mountainside, every farm has different timing for how long they're going to wither. You bring it in, you fry it. You fry it at a lower temperature than green tea and for a shorter amount of time. What are you trying to do when you fry it? You're actually trying to denature part of the oxidation enzyme. You don't want to denature it all, because then you'd have to fry too hot. If you denatured it entirely, you'd have to be at high temperatures, 300 degrees or so. You'd be doing it for 8 to 12, 15 minutes. Here, they're using much closer to between 150 and 200, much closer to 150 actually, and usually 8, 9 minutes at most. So they're trying to denature to a point, but they don't really want to wipe out that oxidation enzyme. They want to tamp it down, so to speak. There's something else that they're trying to do. They want to put the microorganisms from the forest, mind you, into homeostasis. So what does that mean? All these microbial organisms, yeast, molds, fungi, all of that stuff. They want it to go to sleep, hibernate, homeostasis, right? Why do they not want to just wipe it out and kill it? Because, as it turns out, that's what creates fermentation down the line. You put it in homeostasis by applying that heat. After you do that, you roll and shape and bruise the leaves of what you have. And then, as a last step in this first part, you sun dry. Some people take shortcuts, but traditionally, the indigenous peoples and peoples who were born in this area will sun dry. Why is that? Because when you sun dry, you wake up those organisms, those microorganisms, and they can start their work. And this is the critical point right here. These things are awake. Okay. Farmer has to make a decision. Am I going to stop processing, essentially, or am I going to compost it and then go to full fermentation, composted fermentation, which is a 45 to 60 day process? So right here, farmer has to make a decision. Farmer says, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to send it down to the city, because most, not all, but many of the farmers, they don't really have the facilities to fully compost, although it really doesn't take much. So they could, and actually there's some traditional ways of doing that which take a little bit longer, but also some farms do. So a bunch of different choices, but still it's this decision point. Do I want it raw black? I'm not going to compost it. Or do I want it fully fermented? And I'm going to compost it to get there. If you want it raw, unripened, not composted, then at this point you have one more decision as a farmer. And that decision would be, okay, am I going to compress it, or am I going to leave it as loose leaf? So these are the various decisions you have as a farmer. And so at this point, and this is why this is raw black, Cascade, this particular farmer said, okay, we're going to not do the composting process. And in this particular case with Cascade, we're also not going to press it into a cake, because that's the other decision that can be made at this point, whether to press it into a cake or leave it loose leaf. If you leave it loose leaf, as a farmer, what does that decision mean? That decision means that you gotta have storage space, because loose leaf, rather than compressed cakes, takes a lot more storage space. But traditionally, the farmers have this storage space, so they will put it in the storage space, keep it at the accurate temperature to keep it from actually fermenting too fast, and this is a natural fermentation, and protect the tea leaves. So they're thinking about all those things, because you still can't get those tea leaves wet. You get them wet, you're dead in the water. You get mold. Mold is not good. It does not taste good, and it will wreck the crop. So you have to be dry, but you have to have air through the facility so that the fermentation will start to go. This is what raw black is. So what's the characteristic of just harvested raw black? Typically, you really taste the mountain. And this is particularly true in places like Ailau. It's particularly true in places like Labanjiang. These places, when you taste this raw black right out of the pan, and that's stuff that we've done before, oh my God, it is strong. It is almost strength to pucker your mouth for a second. It's that type of strong, but underneath all of that, there's a hint of sweetness. So, okay, we get that done, we put it away, we start to age it. Now, many of you are thinking and are about to ask me a question. I can feel it in the air. Is Cascade aged? Ah, it is aged. It was picked in 2018, put away in 2019, so it is 7 years old. Is the taste and feel of a 7-year-old different than the taste and feel of a 1-year-old? Oh yeah, real different. I'll talk about that difference in a minute. How long does it take to get to the taste and feel of a fully fermented, and will it taste exactly like a composted fully fermented? So let's answer the second question first. Will it taste exactly like a fully composted one? And the answer is no. Why? Because it has much more depth to it. Bijou and I, 1 year, that would be 2019, we've tasted a 50-year-old cake that was a raw black. And yes, when we tasted it, we had a hard time feeling that it wasn't fully fermented, but it did not taste at all like a composted one. Depth of flavor, lots of things underneath that flavor, really good. And that, by the way, is why that cake all by itself on the market would go for somewhere like $50,000 US, because 50 years. I mean, 50 years of energy to keep it in the right, environment, 50 years of care and love, looking in on it. So the question arises, because I just gave you a hint right now in what we tasted, a 50-year-old cake. Is there a difference between a 50-year-old cake and 50-year-old loose leaves? And the answer is yes. We don't 100%, we can't 100% give you the exact difference, but we can tell you the elements that go into that difference. First off, in the loose leaf, especially in an aerated room, all the leaves are aging at really roughly the same pace. Now, I used a synonym for something, and if you're not closely paying attention to what I just said, you're going to miss. And so let's hone in on this. I said aging. What should I have said? I should have said oxidizing. Aging / oxidizing. The fermentation, remember, this is a hare and tortoise thing. You've got fermentation at the beginning. All those organisms in there eating the leaves and producing what they produce and changing the flavor and so forth. And they go fast. They're the hare. They're out there. First 5 years, it's mostly about the fermentation. Does oxidation stop? Is not oxidation an inexorable march when you have oxygen and the oxidative enzyme in a plant? And it is inexorable. Step by step by step, it still oxidizes, but much more slowly because so much of it was denatured. So you don't have as much. But age itself, and I'm using that kind of as a synonym, kicks in and starts to, just keep step by step. And then at year 6, 7, and 8, we've got oxidation at about the same rate, somewhere in the same area of rate as fermentation, because fermentation is slowed down. It has exhausted itself, and oxidation, just keeps that steady trek, and there starts to be a difference in where it is slower, faster for oxidation. And so that's why, as these teas age, you have to be thinking about both things. And so in general, when tea ages, and we know this from here, you drink an aged any one of our teas, what's usually the first thing that comes to mind? Ooh, this is mellow. Wow. Whatever this was 3 years ago, wow, this thing is mellow. Not only is it mellow, what about the taste? That was the mouthfeel. What this is. The taste is also going to change, isn't it? And that taste will somehow perhaps deepen. It will change into another taste. You have a lot of things going on. And this gets you, let's see, how am I doing? Okay. This gets you into what the whole rhythm is about raw black. So in China, and I know I'm almost running out of time, I'll make this short. In China, what role does raw black have in relationship to, in quotes, fully fermented? In other words, here, if you go to many places, you go to a Chinese restaurant, does a Chinese restaurant ever serve you raw black? Not even a single one that I've been to in the US. Maybe there's one out there. I just am unaware of it. That's the first thing. So somehow there is this mystique about fully fermented. Wonder if this mystique is deserved. Well, in Yunnan, the home of the fermented teas, where does the mystique lie? Does it lie with the fully fermented, or does it lie with the raw black? Lies with the raw black. When you go to these famous places, Bingdao, Laobanjiang, even the Jingmai Mountains, you know what? When they're trying to sell sophisticated tea owners or factory producers from Munghai, they come visiting, what did they get out first? They don't normally get out the fully fermented. They normally get out the raw black. Everybody sits down and has that raw black. Oh, it's good. Tells you, it kind of signals what the future might be. All right, I'm almost ready, but not there yet. And this will be really quick, are the raw black and the fully fermented the only things that these farmers are doing with tea leaves? And the answer is no. So the indigenous peoples have several different interesting things that they're doing. The Nashi people put in chilies and garlic into the tea leaves. Oh my God, who does that? Then the Bulong people put in the Sichuan peppercorns into a bamboo, and they put tea leaves in there, and they eat it as they're going along, and eat it and drink it as they're going along. So here at Sophie's, of course, there are rules, right? If we had a tea in here that had chili or garlic or Sichuan peppercorns in it, do you think that I wouldn't be fired within 10 nanoseconds of that being discovered? The answer is I'd be out of here, because that's not what we're selling. But I am trying to give you some background about what goes on in these areas. And think about this a minute, because this isn't just playfulness. Think about what that means about the power of the underlying leaves. This is the whole point of this story. The underlying leaves of places like Ailau and some of these other places I've listed or talked about, it's incredible. It's penetrating. And you get that penetration in the raw black. If you love cliff teas, your tendency when faced with both of these choices normally would be to take the raw black because of the variation in flavor and the power, the different levels of power that you see in the raw black. The variability of raw black, I think, is what attracts so many people in Yunnan, because that's where they focus on drinking the raw black. All right. Oh yes, I'm way overdue. You know, Tea Master's over there waving her hands, you know, for the last 5 minutes. You know, you're way overdue. So, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to bring the beautifully outfitted Biju, and she's going to brew for you, and then well, actually, she's going to brew first and show you, and then we'll all brew together.
Okay. Hi, good morning. 你们好，早上好。Everyone, yeah. Thank you. So we do rub like tea, from the Ailau mountain. So okay, we call Senpu. Okay, so this is my tea tree.
So you see her setup. Her setup, your setup really is 2 cups, a tea strainer. If you have a tea toy, it's fun. Another tea toy, it's fun. But you don't need those things. You need the 2 cups and the strainer. She has 3 because she's making a few more cups. All right. She's drawing water. And you can draw, for a heating purpose, any temperature of water between 175 and 212. Because you're cleaning, you're heating. That's the purpose of this portion of what you're doing. Most important thing, watch her presence, watch her rhythm. You know, it was really great this week because we had a fireman come in, and he's been a fireman for a long time. Came here and he said, I can't believe I've walked back and forth just right by this place and didn't know it existed. This guy is a true aficionado of tea and other aromatics, and it's funny because he tells his crew, he's the boss, he tells his crew, all right, 20 minutes at this place. Why does he say that? He's not rushing through and tasting 4 or 5 teas. One tea, in rhythm, being present, trying to suss out the flavors. Love that this guy is coming in here and doing that. So look at her rhythm, nice and steady and easy. Very present. And she's getting her Cascade. This is 5 grams she's putting in. The water is going to be 175 or less. And that first steeping is going to be 3 minutes. And you notice she puts it into a heated cup. Shakes the leaves. Checks the aroma. It's going to pour the water back in the kettle so she can control it. Just nice and steady, not in a hurry. Beautiful rhythm, beautiful rhythm. I set the time for 3 minutes.
The question, sorry, Peter asked how much hand rolling is involved with Cascade.
Oh, that's a great question. So there's a dual answer to this. If I had been given the assignment to do Cascade, given the fact that I have already several times practiced hand rolling, and actually when I first practiced, I was really proud because I thought, hey, you know, I'm watching them, it's about the same. You know, for me it would have taken 90 minutes. For them, it takes about 60 minutes or so. And their hand rhythms, so it's just like the rhythm of making the tea or brewing the tea. So everything looks like they're really, really present when they're doing it. And it almost seems choreographed. And what is this? This is years of experience. So yeah, it's about a 60-minute for them hand roll. And that's a great question because the teas by area and by custom are hand rolled for different amounts of time. And predictably, as you're implying in your question, you'll get a different result. All right. So the other thing about being present in the fire, this again was wonderful about the fireman because he brought his crew in, the ones who were not afraid to step over the threshold, you know, because again, if you've been going to Mordor all the time and somebody says, well, let's go to Rivendell, trying to get your foot over that threshold is a hard thing. But the ones who have come in with him, they're also learning this idea of, hey, you know, this is changing as you go down the cup. You're getting different things, the speed of how you do things. And so, in effect, he summarized on Thursday, he says, I come here because there's nothing more relaxing than this 20 minutes during the day. It completely, nothing else crosses my mind. I'm completely, and it was funny because 2 of his reports were talking, they were looking at the ceiling and saying, oh yeah, you'd have to use certain tools to get through this ceiling and so forth. And he kind of looked at him and he said, I can't even think about any of that stuff. I'm just thinking about this. So, you guys all know this because every week, this is what you're doing. You're being present. Oh, 3 minutes has passed. Biju is looking at the beauty of those leaves, separating them from the tea water, and we have a result. Let's look at this result. Nice color. There really is color to this. So that would be the first clue that this has some age to it. Because if it were very, very light, it hasn't aged very much. No matter what varietal or where you're doing raw black, as it ages, it colors. All right, I'm going to enter the quality arena, looking for astringency and aftertaste the first time around. Energetics, thinking about that the whole time. And then, second time, taste and aroma. It's always so interesting when I am present with raw black, because when I'm present, especially with our raw blacks, I often ask myself, why aren't I drinking these every single day? It's that good. Now, of course, I'm supposed to be telling you about astringency and aftertaste instead of telling you how good it is. Okay, I've measured, oh, and take notes when you do this. I've measured in my head, I know what the astringency is. Oh, there's definite aftertaste. Hey, I even have some energetics already. All right, second time around, I'm going to look for taste and aroma. Does it ever have one? This has one. Okay, I'm taking mental notes on that, reinforcing the aftertaste. Your turn to brew. It's funny, when we travel to this part of China and we hang out with the farmers and the tea scientists in this part of China, and when they start serving us the raw black, that same question comes to my mind. Why aren't I drinking this every single time I drink tea? It's that good. Drawing your water. You're going to heat your cups. Making sure all the cups are clean and heated. Remember the 175-degree water.
Peter asked, can you talk about the difference between a tightly rolled leaf like some reds, like for example unabridged, and Cascade, which is much looser? Is it the roll, or thank you, is it the roll or how the leaves are prepared before?
Great question. So Peter says, hey, you know, week by week we see different rolls of leaves. Are those, whether it's red or oolong or any of the leaves, what influence does that roll have on flavor, if any? So let's talk about this for a minute, because I'm going to direct your attention actually to Yunnan Province to start out with. In Yunnan Province and in Taiwan, the lightly oxidized oolongs are made rolled into the shape of a ball. Is there a reason that they're rolled up in the shape of a ball? Is that historical? Is that taste-wise? So let me give you a little bit of the history. Pre-1995, those same teas, they were in stripes or strips. They weren't in balls. It's a stylistic thing. Does it influence the flavor? If it does, let me back that part of the statement up. It influences at a very minuscule rate. That is not the main determiner of the flavor. That's a style statement.
Okay.
Oh, 3, yes. I'm paying attention. Great question. And thinking about the reds for a minute, the reds, again, you have some that are needles, so they're not rolled very much. You have some that are more of the leaves. Think about it this way. If you have gigantic leaves, then you tend to roll, whether you're rolling a red or a raw black, you're going to make usually a nice stripe or strip. If it's smaller, you're usually doing, if you're going to roll it at all, you're usually doing something a little fancier, or it's a little different. Let's not call it fancier, and you're shaping it in a different way. So what do I mean by that? All of you have had Sweet Melody and Gold Tip. Those are rolled, those are reds, they're rolled in an artistic way from the farmer's point of view. And that's a style thing. So when people, it's really a sales technique, because when people see those leaves, yeah, I want the leaves, they can't remember the name. I want the red tea leaves that look like they're all rolled in a bundle. And the tea purveyor, if they're any good, they know, oh, okay. So they're probably thinking of the Yunnan one, and they're probably thinking of the ones that are sweeter. They ask the question, you mean the sweeter ones? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Then they pick out. They know, because some farmers there have that as a, I don't want, it's less strong than trademark. It's almost like a trademark, but it's not, because it's not registered. It's a style mark. There you go. That's what it is, a style mark. Great, great question. All right, so take a look at these leaves as they're brewing. That's another thing that's a beauty of these things. Half of them on top, half of them on the bottom, some hanging down. It's just a really beautiful and interesting arrangement. The other thing about this, which is so beautiful, is look at the color of these things. It is not uniform. You know, in so many of the teas, in some of the teas, think heirloom, think silver needle. Those teas, when you put them in water, uniform look, uniform color, no deviations. The raw blacks in general, especially aged as these are. This is why you get this variety in color. Remember, when we got this in year 1, it wasn't this variety of color. There was more color, and certainly there's a variety in terms of the rolling. And to go back to Peter's point, by the way, your timers went off. Go back to Peter's point. I realized there's something that I'm missing about his question, and I just saw it when I looked at the leaves. So here, from the farmer's point of view, they're not looking to make a statement about these leaves in terms of look and feel. So in other places, they do that. There's an aesthetic that's also part of the sales of these leaves. And here, this isn't part of the sale of these leaves. And so that's why it's almost an anti-sales technique that turns into a sales technique, because, oh yeah, take a look at those things. They're all wild and so forth. That's the sense I get from that. There's nothing else really significant to take away from that. When we went to Iwu this year, and we tried some of their raw black. And again, it had this sense of being not as uniform, of being bigger leaves, and that has its inherent beauty all by itself. So there's no taste differentiation. I don't want to say no, but if there is a taste differentiation, it's so minuscule. In fact, you know what? Let's state it this way. The farmers aren't thinking that there's a taste variation. So they're not doing it for that reason.
When they create cakes, however, are they doing, since we're well past the cake, no more cake edict, when cakes are created, I think you mentioned before, there's greater sweetness. Is that a conscious choice for that reason, or also stylistic?
So the question about, okay, so why does anybody do cakes? Let's think about that. They do cakes because they're easier to store, easier to transport, trying to handle loose leaf. And does the Chinese market do more loose leaf in raw black or more cakes? Without question, it's more cakes. Why did we do loose leaf? Because we thought it would be interesting for you, and we're doing an internal experiment, because cakes, we believe, and the Chinese say, 30 to 50 years before they become fully fermented. And as we thought about it, it's like, well, wait a minute. If you have everything exposed to the air, maybe instead of 30 to 50 years, maybe it's 15 to 30 years. And actually, you're going to taste something in 2 weeks. Newman Bonpoa 07. It was actually picked in 06, put in a cake in 07. So that thing is 19, 20 years old. And this is why, take good notes, because you're going to notice a difference between that and this. And it's a very distinct difference, yeah.
Jennifer says the tea liquor smells of the ocean, beach walking, and kelp. Energetically, I'm feeling cleansed and grounded, but not from earthiness, rather from ocean air as I sip the tea.
I love this comparison, because Jennifer juxtaposes a couple things. The first thing is, okay, I'm drinking a pour. It's got to be earthy. Oh no, it's sea ocean. It's kelpy. And wait a minute, didn't he say pour raw black? Where is my earth? I'm getting ocean instead. And there's that ocean energy to it. Great catch. And now you stumbled upon exactly what I'm talking about for the people in Yunnan. For the fully fermented, what's the overwhelming taste? Without question, it's earthy. Occasionally you get a woodsy, but it's for the most part earthy. And the market fermented, it's just terribly earthy and nothing else. Nothing else. But for the raw black, each of them brings such a different profile, and it makes it interesting. Yes.
Rob says the scent of the tea water is sweet and bright, yet round with a hint of fruit. Sue describes the scent as if chocolate and mushrooms were one creature. If chocolate and mushrooms were one creature, it would smell like this. And the taste is smooth, sweet, slightly drying. Vegetal has a hint of vanilla. I'll walk back through any part of this lovely description you want.
Let me start out with Sue's, which is mushroom and chocolate. If there were such a thing, if You know, probably in France, they're secretly growing mushroom and chocolate. And the world hasn't found it yet. But I love that sense of, you know, coming out of the ground, a little hint of earth, but a chocolatey taste. Love that. A hint of mushroom, chocolatey taste. A hint of sweetness, a hint of florality, right? Also, or fruit.
Fruit in the scent. So sweet, bright, yet round, but with a hint of fruit.
Sweet, bright, and round. We always, once you start aging this, have to get to round. And it's levels of roundness. And you're going to discover this during this next 3 weeks. Love the fact that you called out all of those things, because great raw black at the start is hugely overwhelming in flavor. And again, sometimes so much so, it gives you almost a mouth pucker. But it ages, it starts to get this sweet, hints of fruit, and the more it ages, the more the fruit becomes apparent. And as the fruit becomes apparent, oh, wait a minute. 3 years ago, I said it was such and such a fruit. Now I'm saying it's a different fruit. So this oxidative method, combined with the fermentation, changes these flavors, and this is what makes these so interesting. Let's go back to Sue's other part. Outside of the mushroom.
Outside of that, well, it was actually, I think, is Rob's other part, which
Okay.
contrasting all this with the taste. So fruit in the scent, roundness in the scent, but the taste, smooth, sweet, slightly drying, vegetal, and a hint of vanilla.
Smooth, sweet, drying, slightly vegetal, and hey, you know, I make pumpkin pies. Let me put a little vanilla in there. It's got all of those, and what a great capture of those flavors. I taste that vanilla, and normally, who goes around saying, well, this tea tastes like vanilla? Well, folks, this tea does have that hint of vanilla in it. It's really an interesting taste. Yes.
Jennifer observes, curious if this tea, like Ancient Woodland or Black Hole, is one you can drink just before bedtime without the caffeine impeding sleep.
Oh, this is a great question. So, can you take a raw black, and if you've had a hard day, think to yourself, oh, I like the depth of this, I want to have a little of this before I go to sleep, and then be able to fall asleep? I am so sorry to have to tell you that this has more caffeine than the fully fermented. There is a way to a degree to handle that, but in fact, instead of going there, let's just leave it that it has more caffeine than the fully fermented. So be careful. If you're caffeine sensitive, don't do this right before sleep. Although I get why you would do it, because it's so calming and the flavors are so interesting. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, you want to get sleep.
Peter says the flavors are presenting and receding, all riding a consistent base of astringency. I'd call it a fine astringency. I feel more energized, but a forward and upward energy in front of my body, in my front body.
Peter talks about the forward energy, upfront energy in the front part of his body with this tea, and how there is energy right from the get-go out of this tea. There was the other part.
And then that the flavors are receding, presenting, but the consistent base is a fine astringency.
Love this. A fine astringency is the consistent base with the flavors receding and coming back. Does this not remind you of some other types of teas we have? So so there's two ways to think about this, and Peter's comment is really good, because if we were tasting 3 consecutive weeks of year-old or less raw blacks, your commentary would not be what it is today. Your commentary would be, wow, this is forward, it's got considerable energy, it's assaultive on the taste buds, and you wouldn't be able to, you distinguish to a degree, but you wouldn't distinguish to the degree that you're going to distinguish between these 3 because they're all aged. Because the flavor comes down, develops, and it does lie on that fine astringency. Love that statement because, by the way, and this is really important because Peter said it the right way. It's not a building astringency. It gets there and it's just steady. Yes.
Rob says, I feel energetically. I feel like this tea is both warming and cooling at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting. Energetics, warming and cooling at the same time for Rob. And that's not an uncommon thought about this tea. And here's why that description actually works. There's a real reason. The tea bushes, they're small tea trees. They're old. They're not ancient, but they're old, and like 700 or 800 years old. And so therefore they are going to have a different. They're going to have a warming. Normally, raw black has a cooling, though. Just that process. So that's why you get both of these things in a weird way going back and forth. Yeah.
Jen E. observes, the scent has the memory of a fruit tart from the table next to you at a restaurant.
Oh, that's so interesting. Scent has the memory of a fruit cart right next to you at a restaurant.
Fruit tart.
Oh, fruit tart. I like that because what Jen is reflecting is in the background, she tastes underneath this the strength of this tea, that tartness. And that tartness is left over from the very beginning. Because in the very beginning, when we first tasted Cascade, ooh, this has stuff in it.
She follows with some further observations. The taste itself is soft and round, a little bit of honey and rocky earth, topped with a few light floral notes that come and go. Love that it has none of the kombucha flavors you find in some raw blacks. This is one of the raw blacks I really enjoy.
Oh, this is a great commentary. And let's start out with the comparison between kombucha flavors of some raw blacks and what's here. The kombucha flavors of some raw blacks are, for the most part, either an early raw black, in other words, it hasn't matured, or an incorrectly done raw black. It's one of those two things. All raw blacks, as they edge up to this type of age, should never have that if they've been put together correctly. And by the way, these are hard to put together. I mean, when we tried to put together one of these when we were in Yunnan, it takes a lot of work. And you think you're finished and the tea master comes on, oh, you're nowhere near finished. Try again. And it's that type of thing. So it takes years to get to this. I like her commentary on the honey because over and over again, you hear Chinese commentators talk about the honey flavor that's buried in the Ailao tea. As it ages, it comes to the fore. You also tend to hear sweet, you tend to hear floral. All of the things that Jen has mentioned as part of this flavor. This is how you know, by the way, that it's aged. Because it would never come out of the chute like this.
Rob says, I hope when I'm 800 years old, I'm as cool and warm as this tea.
So, Rob is looking towards the future. I like that. And he hopes that when he's 800 years old, he's as mellow and cooling and calm as the tea. And that's a good thought. I've been drinking this for about 650 years, so I still have 150 more years to get. And it works. It's working. So, you know, just keep a steady, keep this up in a steady way, and you'll get there. All right. Ooh, overtalked. Oh well, I had a feeling I might overtalk, but this is a fun series that we're entering. I love the raw black series. I don't know why we don't do it more often. You know, I think my eyes get blinded by Dreamscape and all, you know, the cliff teas, and they kind of cast a shadow on other teas, and therefore I forget sometimes. But I'm really, really happy to be sharing these with you because these are every bit as special. And at the end of the day, I enjoy these a lot. All right, we wrapped up Cascade. As usual, you are all great teachers. And next week, where should we go next week? I feel like staying in the forest. I feel like staying actually in Isla Mountains. Let's go deeper into the forest and do primordial forest. In the meantime, the rest of this week or this upcoming week, stay healthy. See you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.